When skill faces prejudice in a fight for life. Darius Bennett stood silently outside the towering glass entrance of Crescent Heights Medical Center. At 32, with a decade of critical care nursing under his belt and a specialization in trauma response, this was supposed to be his dream job. But as he adjusted his navy blue scrubs and took a deep breath, he sensed that this chapter would be anything but simple. Inside, Angela Morris, the nurse administrator, greeted him warmly. "Your recommendations are outstanding," she said with a bright smile, handing him his ID badge. "And your certifications in advanced trauma life support are exactly what we've been looking for." As they walked through the bustling emergency department, Angela paused outside an office. "I'd like you to meet Dr. Nathaniel Prescott," she said. "He's our chief of trauma. You'll be working closely under his direction." Inside, Dr. Prescott was reviewing patient charts. His silver hair was meticulously combed, his tailored white coat immaculate. He looked up slowly, scrutinizing Darius with a measured gaze before rising to his feet. "So," he said, extending a limp handshake, "you're the new hire. I expected someone with more experience." "I've spent 10 years in critical care," Darius replied evenly. 5 of those in Detroit's busiest Level 1 trauma center. Prescott's thin smile didn't reach his eyes. "At Crescent Heights, we have exceptionally high standards. We demand perfection." Angela offered Darius a sympathetic glance as they left the office. "Don't take it personally," she whispered. "Dr. Prescott is particular." Later that evening, as Darius crossed the staff parking lot, a young nurse flagged him down. "I'm Taylor," she said, extending her hand. "I figured you could use a heads up." "About what?" "Prescott," Taylor replied with a glance over her shoulder. "He has preferences. I've been here 3 years, certified in every advanced procedure we offer, and not once has he selected me for his primary trauma team. Neither has Dr. Patel, and she's the best surgeon we've got." Darius understood immediately. The knot in his stomach tightened. He'd encountered this before. Over the next 3 weeks, Darius settled into life at Crescent Heights. His skill earned the respect of most of the staff, except Prescott. The chief's dismissive attitude evolved from subtle coldness to outright obstruction. Darius was routinely assigned away from critical cases, despite his expertise. One particularly hectic Thursday, Darius was restocking supplies in Trauma Bay 1 when Dr. Prescott swept in, a gaggle of medical students trailing him like ducklings. Prescott scowled. "Nurse Bennett, you're not assigned here today." "Just restocking supplies," Darius replied, calm but firm. "In future, leave that to the appropriate staff," Prescott snapped. "This trauma department succeeds because of structure, precision, and experience." That night, Darius was invited out for drinks by Dr. Andrew Prescott, Nathaniel's son. At Callahan's pub, away from the sterile hospital corridors, Darius learned that Andrew had a passion for botanical illustration, and that the elder Prescott hadn't always been so unyielding. "After my mom died," Andrew confided, swirling his drink, "he changed. Medicine became his whole life. Precision. Control. It's his armor." "That explains the perfectionism," Darius said. "But not everything," Andrew replied, his tone somber. Taylor, who had joined them, cut in. "Let's call it what it is," she said sharply. "Your father doesn't trust people who don't look like him to lead." The next day, Andrew kept his word and asked Darius to assist with a difficult case. They stabilized the patient together until Nathaniel Prescott appeared. "You should have consulted Dr. Kramer," Prescott said. "Darius has specialized training in geriatric trauma," Andrew replied. "He was the best choice." Prescott's jaw tightened. He called Andrew aside, but Darius overheard him say, "You're a Prescott. Maintain the standard. Be selective about who you work with." "I did select," Andrew replied. "The most qualified nurse." 6 weeks in, during a chaotic Saturday night shift, a multi-car pileup overwhelmed the ER. Darius stabilized an elderly woman, then turned as paramedics wheeled in a young man with a massive arterial bleed. "BP is dropping," the paramedic reported. "Trauma 1, barked Prescott. "Hanson, with me." "I have experience with vascular trauma," Darius offered. Prescott dismissed him without a glance. Minutes later, chaos erupted in Trauma 1. Through the glass, Darius watched Prescott struggle to clamp the hemorrhaging vessel. The alarm screamed. Without invitation, Darius entered. "You need vascular loops," he said urgently. "Get out." Prescott barked. "He'll die if you don't act," Darius insisted. "Johnson's right," Andrew said from the doorway. "Dad, we need his help." Prescott relented. For the next 20 minutes, Darius managed the fluids while Prescott worked on the vessel. Together, they stabilized the patient. The next morning, Angela summoned Darius. Dr. Prescott filed a complaint, she said. But 6 staffers, including Dr. Andrew Prescott, submitted statements supporting your actions. You saved the patient's life. She took a breath. I'm transferring you to the trauma response team. You'll report to Dr. Rhodes now. 2 nights later, Darius attended the hospital's Hope Gala fundraiser. During dessert, a mass casualty alert came in. Multiple drownings at a swim meet. Back at Crescent Heights, Darius worked alongside Dr. Rhodes, stabilizing victims. Then paramedics wheeled in a teenage boy, lifeless. 17-year-old male, submersion 4 minutes, no pulse, the paramedics said. Nathaniel Prescott froze. Christopher, he whispered. His son. Prescott's training kicked in. Trauma 1. Darius joined them. He's still in asystole, a nurse reported. Darius said, I specialize in pediatric drowning resuscitation. Please, let me help. Andrew pressed his father. Dad, let him. Prescott nodded stiffly. For 30 tense minutes, Darius directed the resuscitation. On the 3rd round of his protocol, Christopher's heart rhythm returned. We have a pulse, a nurse confirmed. Prescott exhaled. Thank you, he said quietly. 3 days later, Christopher was improving. Darius found himself sought after for advice by staff who had once kept him at a distance. In the ICU, Christopher spoke weakly. Dad told me, you saved my life. It was a team effort, Darius replied. Later, Nathaniel Prescott approached him. I've been reviewing our department protocols. Your input would be welcome. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. Weeks passed. Darius accepted a consultation role with Children's Hospital and applied for the Associate Clinical Director position at Crescent Heights. Nathaniel Prescott informed him of new qualification-based staffing guidelines, eliminating the biases that had once sidelined people like Darius. I've recommended you to the Clinical Excellence Committee, Prescott added. 6 months after Christopher's near drowning, Darius presented his resuscitation protocol at a major conference. From the podium, he saw familiar faces, Dr. Rhodes, Taylor, and in the back, Nathaniel Prescott watching attentively. Afterward, Prescott approached. Christopher's coming home this weekend. He'd like you to join us for dinner. Darius accepted. Over dinner, Christopher thanked him properly. You gave me a second chance, he said. Later, in Prescott's study, Nathaniel handed Darius the latest data on his protocol. Survival rates are up 22%, Prescott said. He looked Darius in the eye. I won't pretend recent events haven't changed me. When Christopher was on that table, all that mattered was saving him. That clarity should guide everything we do. It always has, Darius replied quietly. A year later, Darius stood in Trauma Bay 1, now the clinical director of trauma response. Protocols are guidelines, he told the new residents. But clinical judgment saves lives. After training, Prescott approached. The board is restructuring. They're considering co-directors for emergency medicine, one for operations, one for education and research. You're being considered for the latter. At the dedication of Crescent Heights' new education center, Darius spoke. Emergency medicine is about precision and adaptability, he said, and the courage to innovate. Dr. Robert Williams, the hospital's first black physician, shook his hand afterward. We stand on your shoulders, Darius said. And others will stand on yours, Dr. Williams replied. Weeks later, Taylor reported a problem. She'd been passed over for a leadership role despite superior qualifications. Darius escalated the issue carefully, leading to her appointment as co-leader on the sepsis initiative. That's a better fit, she told him, grateful. Christopher, now in medical school, asked Darius to advise his thesis on bias in medical research. I'd be honored, Darius said. 1 year to the day after saving Christopher, Darius trained new trauma residents. The hospital CEO confirmed his co-director role was imminent. We need leaders who understand both medicine and humanity, she said. As Darius left that evening, he passed a young nurse, Marcus, who had just joined the trauma team. Your story inspired me, Marcus said. We need people like you, Darius replied. And as he watched Marcus walk away, Darius thought of what Dr. Williams had said. Progress wasn't instant. It was built step by step, generation by generation. And this was just the beginning.